The Halstead Museum air was still and cool. It smelled of dust and old paper. Annette Croft preferred it that way. Its quiet consistency comforted her. She logged the donation into the ledger. Her handwriting was perfectly even. The entry was for a 1920s farm ledger. It came from the Erickson family estate. She carried the box to the climate-controlled room. Archival storage was her true domain. She placed the ledger on a shelf. It sat between a ship's log. The ledger's cover was worn brown leather. Its spine cracked softly as she opened it. Pages held cramped agricultural notes. They detailed crop yields and repairs. She examined the paper for acid damage. It was stable but fragile. Her fingers traced the lines of faded ink. Numbers told a story of hard work. Then she closed the book carefully. She slotted it into its permanent position. Her work here was now complete. She logged the storage location in the database. Annette walked back to her main desk. The museum was largely empty today. She enjoyed the deep, enveloping silence. It allowed for meticulous, uninterrupted thought. She removed her white cotton gloves. She placed them neatly in her desk drawer. Her movements were always deliberate and calm. Nothing was ever rushed or out of place. At 5 o'clock, she gathered her things. She said a soft goodbye to the security guard. She stepped into the late afternoon light. The city sounds felt unusually loud. Her walk home took 22 minutes. She followed the same route every day. She passed the same shops and trees. She found great comfort in this routine. The Croft bungalow was a modest home. Its blue paint was fading but neat. She unlocked the front door and entered. The interior was orderly and spotlessly clean. Leo was already in the kitchen. He was chopping vegetables for their dinner. He smiled at her without stopping. "Good day in the archives?" he asked. "It was quiet and productive," she said. She placed her bag on its hook. She then walked over to the sink. She washed her hands with methodical care. She dried her hands on a linen towel. She began to set the small table. Leo hummed a tune while he cooked. This was their familiar, gentle evening ritual. They ate a simple meal of chicken. They discussed his landscape project downtown. He was designing a small pocket park. It involved drought-resistant plants. After dinner, Leo moved to the living room. He reviewed plant supplier catalogs. Annette cleared the dishes and washed them. She put each item in its place. Then she put on her gardening clogs. She slid open the back door quietly. She stepped into their small, tidy yard. The evening air was growing cool. She walked to the far wooden shed. It looked like ordinary garden storage. She unlocked a second, interior door. This led to her private greenhouse. The space was humid and warmly lit. Ranks of orchids sat on precise shelves. Their blooms were exotic and breathtakingly beautiful. The air smelled of soil and life. She checked the humidity gauges first. She adjusted a mister with a delicate touch. She examined a Laelia purpurata's leaves. Its condition was perfect and vibrant. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket. It was a notification from her bank. She read the brief, automated message quickly. A scheduled transfer was completed. She acknowledged the alert and put the phone away. She continued her tender plant care. This was her other world of control. Every variable was managed and understood. Across town, a different system activated. Beacon Trust Bank's software ran its nightly check. It scanned millions of transactions for patterns. An algorithm flagged a series. The pattern was small but structurally perfect. It involved 12 deposits every month. They were always $500 exactly. They came from different cashiers' checks. The account name was unusual. It was the Halstead Historical Preservation Fund. The algorithm tagged it for human review, a report queued in an officer's inbox. That officer was Simon Pierce. He would not see it until morning. His desk was in a sterile building. His world was one of digital rules. Annette finished in the greenhouse an hour later. She locked the interior door securely. She exited the shed and locked it too. She returned to the bright kitchen. Leo was now sketching park layouts. He looked up as she came inside. "Everything blooming all right out there?" he asked. His tone was casually interested. Everything is progressing as expected, she said. She gave him a small, reassuring smile. She then prepared 2 cups of herbal tea. She carried them to the sofa. They sat together in comfortable silence. He worked on his sketches with a pencil. She read a historical taxonomy text. The clock ticked softly on the wall. Later, she opened a bedroom drawer. It was her personal jewelry drawer. Beneath a tray lay a simple notepad. She wrote a single figure on a page. It was the current total fund balance. She looked at the number for a moment. Then she tore off the page neatly. She shredded it into thin strips. She placed the strips in a small bin. This was for sensitive personal waste. She would dispose of it separately tomorrow. Her routine included this extra step. Leo came into the room yawning. He kissed her softly on the cheek. "Don't stay up too late," he murmured. He climbed into bed and was soon asleep. Annette sat at her dressing table longer. She brushed her hair with slow, even strokes. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her expression was placid and untroubled. She thought about the Erickson farm ledger. Its paper had felt surprisingly thick. Some pages showed almost invisible indentations. They were likely from a farmer's pen. She made a mental note to examine it. Spectral imaging might reveal lost notes. The museum had a grant for that. Alina Rosario was skilled in using it. Alina was the junior curator for digital projects. She was enthusiastic and brilliantly technical. She often asked to scan materials. Annette usually approved these requests. This ledger could be a good candidate. It might show hidden weather patterns. That data could be useful for historians. Annette decided to suggest it tomorrow. She turned off the light and went to bed. She lay beside her sleeping husband. Her mind was clear and purposefully empty. She fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning began identically to the last. She made breakfast and packed 2 lunches. Leo left for his design firm first. She walked her route to the museum. Margaret Beaufort was in the main lobby. The museum director was a tall, stern woman. She reviewed a display case with disapproval. "This lighting is entirely wrong," she stated. Annette paused but did not engage. She continued toward the archive staircase. Margaret's voice carried down the hall. It was full of imperious dissatisfaction. The archive was dark and cool. Annette turned on the banks of lights. They hummed to life with a soft flicker. She settled at her desk and logged in. Her first task was reviewing acquisition emails. A family offered some vintage postcards. She drafted a polite response of acceptance. She scheduled a pickup for next week. Then she retrieved the Erickson ledger again. She carried it to the digital lab. Alina Rosario was already there working. She calibrated a large overhead scanner. "Good morning, Annette," Alina said brightly. "What do you have today?" She peered at the old ledger with interest. Her eyes were sharp and inquisitive. "A candidate for spectral imaging," Annette said. She placed the ledger on the table. "The paper has subsurface indentations. A farmer's notes may be hidden." "Oh, fantastic," Alina said with excitement. She carefully opened the ledger's cover. She examined the first few pages closely. "The paper quality is quite good." "Can you prioritize it this week?" Annette asked. Her voice was its usual calm monotone. "It may have historical significance." She kept her reasoning vague. "Absolutely," Alina replied, already making notes. "I'll start after lunch today. The camera is all set up." She smiled, eager to begin the discovery. Annette gave a slight nod of approval. She left the ledger in Alina's care. She returned to her desk in the archives. The morning passed with quiet work. At Beacon Trust, Simon Pierce arrived at his desk. He drank coffee and opened his queue. He saw the flagged report about the fund. He opened the file with curiosity. He reviewed the deposit pattern first. 24 deposits per year, perfectly timed. All were from cashier's check scans. The annual sum was significant. He pulled the account application documents next. They appeared to be in standard order. The signature was a clean, legible cursive. The address was the museum. He checked the business registration database. He searched for the preservation fund. The system returned a simple result. No such entity was found. This was his first point of concern. A fund without registration was unusual. It required a deeper level of review. He began compiling a preliminary memo. He noted the perfect deposit pattern. He noted the lack of registration. He noted the museum's address. He flagged the account for investigation. This memo would go to his supervisor. The supervisor would contact authorities. This was standard procedure for anomalies. Simon finished his coffee and moved on. He had no feeling about the case. It was another file in his queue. He sent the memo up the chain. The bureaucratic machine engaged its gears. Annette was unaware of this development. She ate her packed lunch at her desk. She reviewed a conservation supply catalog. She ordered acid-free document boxes. After lunch, Alina came to the archive door. She held a tablet looking puzzled. "Annette, can I show you something?" she asked. Her excitement was tinged with confusion. "Of course, Alina," Annette said. She put her catalog aside. She followed Alina back to the lab. The ledger was open under bright lights. "I did the first imaging," Alina explained. She showed Annette an image on her tablet. It showed the page with enhanced contrast. The farmer's handwriting was dark. But in the margin was something else. It was precise, geometric indentations. They formed a modern string of numbers. "This looks like a bank routing number," Alina said. She pointed at the 9-digit sequence. It was pressed into the paper long ago. The style of the numbers was contemporary. "This doesn't match the 1920s penmanship." Annette studied the image silently. Her face showed no surprise or alarm. She observed the factual discrepancy. "How could a modern number get there?" she asked. "Someone used this ledger as a pad," Alina suggested. "They wrote on a page on top. The pressure left this behind." It was a logical conclusion. "Which page was on top?" Annette inquired. Her voice was professionally curious. "Can we determine what was written?" She leaned closer to the screen. "Not from this," Alina said, shaking her head. "We only have the impression. The original document is gone." She seemed disappointed. "A fascinating artifact of use," Annette remarked. She straightened and smoothed her blouse. "Documented in the scan notes, it's a curious puzzle." "Report it to Director Beaufort?" Alina asked. She was fixated on the oddity. It felt out of place. "I would not bother Margaret," Annette said calmly. "It is likely a mundane accident. A bank employee used an old book." Her explanation was plausible. Alina seemed to accept this reasoning. She shrugged and saved the image file. "I'll keep it in the metadata." She turned back to her equipment. Annette returned to her desk. She sat down and took a slow breath. She opened her desk drawer for a pen. Her hand was perfectly steady. She wrote a reminder on a sticky note. It was about ordering archival folders. She placed it on her monitor. It was an utterly normal action. Inside, her mind processed quickly. The routing number was a potential problem. It was a link she had not anticipated. She trusted Alina would not pursue it. Alina was diligent but followed instructions. Annette's authority in the archive was absolute. The curator would catalog the find. Then she would likely forget. The risk was now marginally higher. Annette calculated this new variable calmly. She considered possible trajectories. The probability of exposure remained low. She decided no action was required yet. Any move could draw more attention. Steady inaction was the correct strategy. She returned to the postcard collection. Simon Pierce's memo reached his supervisor. The supervisor's name was not important. He reviewed the facts for 30 seconds. He agreed it warranted review. He forwarded the file to a department. This was the Financial Intelligence Unit. The unit reviewed suspicious reports. A case worker would be assigned. That worker was Cassandra Vance. She went by Cass. She received the file late that afternoon. She read Simon's memo with sharp eyes. She noted the structured deposits. She noted the unregistered fund name. The museum connection piqued her interest. Nonprofits sometimes hid transactions. She opened a new case file. She titled it Halstead Historical Preservation Fund. She entered the basic details. This was the start. Her next step was public records. She would start tomorrow morning. For now, she closed the file. She finished her day with paperwork. Annette left the museum on time. Her walk home was slower than usual. She observed the details of passing streets. She noted a crack in the sidewalk. She saw a for sale sign. She saw a child drop ice cream. These observations grounded her mind. They provided a tapestry of normal life. Leo was grilling fish in the backyard. He waved to her with his tongs. "Perfect timing," he called out cheerfully. She offered her small smile. She went inside to change her clothes. She put on soft, worn linen trousers. She returned to set the table. They ate outside as the sun set. "I need a new soil source," Leo mentioned. He took a bite of the trout. "My usual supplier raised prices." He sounded slightly frustrated. "What is the best alternative?" Annette asked. She took a sip of cool water. He listed 2 other companies. He compared their pricing and quality. "I'll go with Metro Garden Supply," he concluded. "Their premium mix gets good reviews." He wiped his mouth. "I'll order a few bags tomorrow." "That sounds wise," she said. Her encouragement was supportive. After dinner, she went to her greenhouse. Leo stayed to clean the grill. She checked a specific plant. It was a Dendrobium spectabile. Its flowering cycle was nearly complete. Soon it would enter dormancy. After dormancy, it could be divided. A single division could be sold. She had a buyer interested. The buyer understood privacy. She calculated the timeline in her head. It would be 6 to 8 weeks. The process required absolute patience. She had a deep supply. She heard Leo come into the house. She heard the clatter of dishes. She finished her inspection and joined him. They spent the evening as always. Later, she checked a dedicated email account. It was not on her personal phone. It was on a small, separate tablet. She used it for specific communications. There was one new message. It was from the plant buyer. The subject read inquiry on availability. The text was brief and polite. She drafted a simple reply. "The specimen progresses well. Expect contact in 8 weeks. Thank you for your patience." She sent it without a signature. Then she cleared the tablet's history. She powered the device down. She placed it back in a locked case. She put the case in her drawer. Leo was already reading in bed. He did not ask about the tablet. He had seen it many times. He assumed it was for museum business. Annette joined him and picked up her book. She read about Byzantine textile patterns. The complex designs were soothing. They followed strict, beautiful rules. She felt the rhythm of her life. It was a mosaic of chosen pieces. Each piece had its purpose. Together, they formed a picture. The picture was one of quiet normalcy. It showed a dedicated archivist. It showed a woman who loved orchids. It showed a person of routine. This was the surface layer. The layers beneath were more intricate. They were not for casual observation. They required a trained eye. Cass Vance had such a trained eye. She would begin her work tomorrow. Her first step was public records. She would search for museum finances. Annette knew such searches were possible. She had accounted for that long ago. The museum's filings were deliberately sparse. They showed just enough. Margaret Beaufort handled those filings. She disliked scrutiny of any kind. Her reports were minimal and often late. This provided a layer of obscurity. Annette turned off her reading lamp. She said good night to Leo in the dark. She closed her eyes and let sleep come. Her breathing slowed into a pattern. The city slept around their bungalow. In a data center, servers hummed. They recorded countless transactions. The preservation fund was dormant. No deposits were scheduled this week. The pattern had a built-in pause. This was part of the design. Consistency needed to look natural. In the museum, the ledger rested. Alina's scan files were saved. The image with the number was archived. It was one file among thousands. The routing number was for a small bank. That bank had been closed for years. Its assets were absorbed by a chain. The number was a ghost. Tracing it would lead to a dead end. This was part of a careful design. Dead ends discourage pursuers. They suggest a waste of time. Annette had planned for this. She had used that ledger intentionally. It was a calculated risk. An accidental discovery would seem meaningless. Her sleep was deep and restful. She did not dream of ledgers. She dreamed of geometric patterns. They repeated in perfect sequences. The morning brought a soft, steady rain. Annette watched it from the kitchen window. She observed water-tracing paths on the glass. Each drop followed its own course. Leo joined her with his coffee mug. "Good day for the plants," he observed quietly. He stood beside her for a moment. Then he gathered his things for work. Annette packed her own lunch and bag. She added a small, folded umbrella. Her routine adapted to external conditions. She left the house at her usual time. Her walk was quieter in the rain. Droplets muted the city's noise. She arrived at the museum with damp shoes. The archivist's desk felt like a sanctuary. Cass Vance began her work. She sat at her clean, organized desk. Her first search was for the Halstead Museum. She pulled its charitable registration filings. The documents were sparse and minimal. The museum reported negligible annual revenue. It listed Margaret Beaufort as the officer. Its purpose was historical preservation. The financial summaries showed small donations. They were in the hundreds annually. There was no mention of a fund. This was her first contradiction. The bank account held $60,000. The museum's filings showed a fraction. Money moved outside the books. Cass made a note with a pen. Her next step was a business search. She confirmed Simon's finding. No preservation fund existed. It was not a corporation or trust. So the name was a fiction. This suggested deliberate deception. Cass felt a spark of focus. This was a clear matter for investigation. She drafted an official request. It was a voluntary information subpoena. It asked for all account documentation. This included signature cards. The process would take several days. She moved to her next item. She decided to visit the museum. Direct observation could be useful. Annette reviewed a conservation report. Elena appeared in the archive doorway again. She looked more puzzled than before. "Annette, I have an odd question." "Please come in, Elena," Annette said. She set her report aside calmly. She gave the woman her full attention. Her posture was professionally reserved. "I was curious about that number," Elena began. She held her tablet to her chest. "I ran it through a database. The bank is defunct." "That is not surprising," Annette replied. Her tone was mildly instructive. "The ledger sat in an attic. Many businesses have come and gone." "But the format is modern," Elena countered gently. She was intellectually curious. "The bank closed 5 years ago. The impression could be recent." "Perhaps a donor used it as a pad," Annette offered. She provided a simple explanation. "The Erickson family ran businesses. This is a mundane artifact." Elena seemed to accept this logic. Her curiosity was satisfied. "You're probably right," she said with a shrug. "I'll mark it as incidental." "Thank you for your thorough work," Annette said. She offered a small nod. Elena smiled and returned to the lab. The potential crisis was averted. Annette returned to her conservation report. She read the same paragraph 3 times. Her mind processed the new information. Elena's curiosity was a variable. The curator was sharp and detail-oriented. Her enthusiasm could become a liability. Annette considered this carefully. She decided to engage her more. She would give her a new project. It would consume her energy fully. Annette reviewed the collection mentally. She identified a box of maps. They were perfect for Elena's skills. They required multispectral analysis. They would provide a fascinating puzzle. This would redirect her attention. Cass arrived at the museum before noon. She presented herself as a federal auditor. This was a simplification of her role. It was an effective pretext. Margaret Beaufort met her in the lobby. The director was visibly irritated. "We are underfunded," she stated coldly. "What is this regarding?" "Routine compliance for educational entities," Cass explained. She held a generic clipboard. "I need to see financial record-keeping. It won't take long." Margaret scoffed but led her to an office. It was a cluttered, old-fashioned room. She produced a file of statements. They were for the operating account. The balances were consistently low. Cass noted a different account number. It was not from Simon's memo. This was a second contradiction. "Do you have other accounts?" Cass asked. Her voice was neutral. "Any restricted funds?" She kept her eyes on the papers. "An endowment with the foundation," Margaret said dismissively. "It yields $500 a year. Our finances are not complex." "I'll need that paperwork too," Cass said. She took notes without reaction. She built a picture of poverty. Margaret produced another slim folder. The endowment was small as described. Cass studied the signature cards. They bore Margaret's sweeping signature. The fund application signature was different. It was clean, vertical cursive. Cass stored this detail. She thanked Margaret for her cooperation. "May I see archival storage?" Cass requested next. "The audit includes collection security." This was a reasonable extension. Margaret looked more annoyed. "My archivist can show you." She summoned Annette via intercom. Then she retreated to her office. Annette appeared a moment later. She was calm and composed as always. "How may I assist you?" she asked. Her gaze was direct. "I need storage protocols," Cass said. She adopted mild disinterest. She followed Annette to the basement. The air grew cooler. Annette explained the climate control. She showed the secure access logbook. Her explanations were precise and thorough. She revealed nothing extra. Cass observed the environment and woman. The archive was meticulously organized. Annette Croft was the same way. Her movements were efficient. "You manage all acquisitions?" Cass inquired. She examined a shelf of ledgers. Her eyes scanned for patterns. "I log and process donations, yes," Annette confirmed. She stood with hands clasped. She was professionally competent. Cass saw no deception. "Do you handle financial aspects?" Cass asked. She kept the question casual. She watched Annette's face closely. "Only tax receipts for donations," Annette replied. Her answer was immediate. "The director handles banking." This matched Margaret's presentation. Cass nodded as if satisfied. She asked a few more questions. Annette answered each one fully. The tour concluded. Cass left with new impressions. The public poverty was genuine. The director was uncooperative. The archivist was controlled. The hidden fund did not fit. Someone moved money with care. Cass sat in her car. She reviewed her notes. She needed the bank's documents now. She drove back to her office. She checked her request status. It was processed but not fulfilled. She decided to visit Simon Pierce. A conversation could expedite things. She called Beacon Trust for an appointment. She would see him later. Annette returned to her desk. She analyzed the auditor's questions. They focused on financial processes. This was not standard. The woman observed everything closely. She had the eyes of an investigator. Annette recognized the attention. It was assessment. She considered the implications. The bank's report had escalated. This was a foreseeable stage. Her plans accounted for this. She needed to reinforce normalcy. She decided to engage Leo's project. She would take interest in his soil search. This created visible activity. She sent him a text at lunch. "Did you order the soil?" she asked. It was a domestic question. It was a thread of ordinary life. He replied a few minutes later. "Ordered 3 bags for tomorrow. Thanks." His reply included a smile. She put her phone away. After lunch, she brought maps to Alina. "I found these in a cabinet," Annette explained. "They are 19th century surveys. The ink is badly faded." Alina's eyes lit with interest. "These are wonderful," she breathed. She unrolled one brittle sheet. "The camera will recover the lines." "It would be a valuable contribution," Annette said. "Please make this your priority." She assigned the task with authority. Alina accepted eagerly. The new project would consume weeks. It would satisfy Alina's instincts. The ledger would recede. This was strategic reallocation. Cass arrived at Beacon Trust at 3. Simon Pierce met her in a conference room. He was a nervous man. He handed her a folder. "This is the account information," he said. His voice was soft. "The application and deposit records. The checks are from different issuers." Cass opened the folder. She examined the first page. It was the application form. The signature was the clean cursive. The address was the museum's. The phone was a museum line. She compared it to her notepad. It matched the public number. She flipped to deposit slip images. Each was a cashier's check scan. Each was to the fund. Each was $500. The checks were from different branches. They were from different banks. This showed deliberate effort. The purchaser was not listed. But each slip had a note. It was a letter in the memo. The letter was a capital C. Cass pointed at it. "Do you see this notation?" she asked Simon. He leaned forward and adjusted his glasses. He nodded slowly. "It could be an initial," he suggested, "or a category code." He seemed embarrassed he missed it. Cass did not chastise him. "The handwriting on these slips," Cass continued. "Compare it to the application." She placed pages side by side. The letter forms were identical. "It's the same person," Simon confirmed. His voice held relief. He provided useful evidence. This justified his initial flag. "Who is the contact?" Cass asked. She read the application's line. It listed A. Croft, archivist. The puzzle shifted focus. Annette Croft was the quiet archivist. She had just given Cass a tour. She claimed no financial responsibility. This was a third contradiction. Cass felt the case tightening. The subject had a face now. She thanked Simon for his time. She took the folder. She now had probable cause. She needed to trace the checks. That meant visiting issuing banks. It would be a slow process. But first, she would run a check. She needed to know about Annette Croft. She entered the name into her database. The search returned basic information. Annette Croft, age 44, married to Leo Croft. No criminal record. She worked at the museum 12 years. Her financial profile appeared modest. A mortgage, car payments, no extravagant debts. It was a careful middle-class life. The disparity was more fascinating. A modest salary deposited thousands. She used a fictional name. She hid the money's origin. Cass drafted an affidavit. She requested a search warrant. She wanted the fund's records. She also wanted personal records. This process would take days. Cass decided to pursue checks first. She chose one from 6 months prior. It was from a credit union. She drove there before closing. She showed her badge and the image. The manager was helpful but constrained. He confirmed the check's validity. "Who purchased it?" Cass asked directly. The manager consulted his system. He frowned at the screen. "The purchaser was E. Rosario," he said. This was a new name. Cass wrote it down carefully. "Do you have an address?" she asked. The manager shook his head. "It was a cash transaction," he explained. "Over 500 requires ID. Our system only lists the name." He seemed sorry. Cass thanked him and left. Elena Rosario was the junior curator. She had shown Annette the number. This connection was intertwined. Perhaps Elena was an unwitting accomplice. She could have purchased a check. The reason would be museum business. Annette would reimburse her. This was a common layering method. It placed distance between source and deposit. Cass needed to speak with Elena, but she had to be careful. She decided to wait for the warrant. Direct questioning could jeopardize things. She returned to her office. She finished the affidavit. She submitted it electronically to a judge. Her workday ended with progress. The scheme's outlines were emerging. It was a patient funneling of money. The purpose remained opaque. At home, Annette helped unload soil bags. They were heavy and smelled of peat. He stacked them in the shed. She handed him a glass of water. "This should be perfect," he said. He wiped his forehead. He was happy with progress. She did not mention the visit. She did not speak of Elena's discovery. She kept these in a compartment. Her domestic life was unchanged. That evening, she reviewed her ledger. It was an unmarked accounting notebook. It tracked dates and plant codes. It showed her second life's rhythm. The notebook was in the greenhouse. It was inside a hollow manual. She updated it with a pencil. The numbers were columns of power. She calculated the current total silently. It approached a target number. That number represented sufficiency. She was closer than ever. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. It was for a dental cleaning. She acknowledged it. These appointments were essential cover. She joined Leo on the sofa. He watched a documentary about forests. She picked up her textile book. The evening passed tranquilly. Later, she lay awake briefly. She thought about the routing number. It was a minor flaw. Flaws could be studied. She assumed Cass was curious. The auditor suggested deep professionalism. She would follow the thread. Annette had prepared for years. She built layers of diversion. The most important layer was banality. The money was not for luxury. It was for a purpose. That purpose was almost within reach. She allowed faint anticipation. It was a quiet warmth. She closed down that feeling. Emotion was a variable she disallowed. It clouded judgment and prompted mistakes. She needed pure reason. She focused on breathing until sleep. The next morning was Friday. The museum would be busy with volunteers. This provided social camouflage. Margaret Beaufort was leaving for a conference. She gave Annette irritable instructions. The director would be gone 3 days. This offered a respite. Annette used the quiet morning. She labeled a box of plates. Elena was absorbed with the maps. The archive was a productive haven. Cass's warrant was approved. She received notification before 10. She had legal access to the fund. She also had access to personal accounts. She started with personal records. Annette's accounts showed no large withdrawals. Salary and bills were regular. There was no obvious cash source. This meant cash came from outside. The source was an offline asset. Cass considered possibilities. It could be a hidden inheritance. It could be sold valuables. Or it could be more unusual. She turned to the fund's history. She printed the 37-month statement. She taped pages to her wall. The pattern was unbroken rhythm. It was a metronome of accumulation. She stared at the grid. She looked for any deviation. There was none. This discipline was remarkable. It spoke of immense control. Cass felt a strange respect. The how was clear. The why was still a mystery. Her phone rang, breaking concentration. It was the judge's clerk. Cass provided a clarification. She decided to trace more checks. She needed to confirm the pattern. She drove to another bank. This check was from 9 months ago. The process was identical. She showed her badge and warrant. The manager pulled the record. The purchaser was again E. Rosario. Cass asked for camera footage. It was overwritten after 90 days. This was standard policy, another dead end for evidence. But the pattern was established. Elena purchased checks routinely. Cass needed to understand her role. She decided to check Elena's background. A search revealed a clean record. Elena Rosario, 28, employed 2 years. She had student loans. She likely was an unknowing tool. Cass would interview her eventually. But first, she needed the cash source. She returned to her office. An asset converted to cash over months. It was liquidated in increments. What asset provided steady liquidity? The answer came suddenly. It could be a collection of items. Items sold one by one. They needed significant value. They needed a discrete channel. Cass thought about the museum. Annette had access to artifacts, but pieces would be missed. This was not stolen antiquities. She considered other collectibles, fine art, stamps, coins, or books. These could be sold privately. Sums matched $500 increments. She needed to see personal property. The warrant covered her home. Cass decided a visit was next. She would go with her partner tomorrow. She spent the day preparing. She compiled a list of questions. She avoided leading language. She wanted to observe reactions. At the museum, Annette received a delivery. It was a box of storage boxes. She signed for it and unpacked. The task was satisfying. Elena came for a fresh map scan. She was excited about progress. "I can see street names," she said. "This will rewrite local history." "I am pleased with your work," Annette said. Her praise was measured. She handed Elena fresh gloves. "Handle the edges carefully." Elena nodded and returned. Annette finished unpacking the boxes. She then logged into the server. She checked access logs for lab files. She saw Alina open the ledger folder. It was accessed once this morning. Annette noted the timestamp. It was likely routine backup. She closed the log and continued. The day ended without incident. She walked home under a clear sky. The weekend promised quiet time. Leo planned a botanical garden trip. He wanted to study layouts. Annette agreed to accompany him. It was a normal couple's activity. It also provided a visible alibi. She was a woman who visited gardens. She was not a suspect. Image management was ongoing. That night, she checked the tablet. There was a new email. It was from the plant buyer. It was continued interest. She deleted it without replying. The timeline was not right. Patience was the governing principle. She powered down the tablet. She went to sleep easily. Cass finalized plans for the home visit. She coordinated with Agent Miller. They would arrive tomorrow at 10. It was a Saturday. This increased the chance of everyone home. This was the next escalation. Cass felt tension before confrontation. She hoped for clarity. She expected more layers. Annette Croft was a woman of layers. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Leo was already making coffee. He had his garden map spread on the table. He circled areas to study. Annette watered the houseplants methodically. She checked each for distress signs. Her routine was a deliberate ballet. It centered her mind. At 9:45, a car arrived. It was a nondescript sedan. Two women stepped onto the sidewalk. They wore professional clothing. Cass Vance led the way. Her partner carried a briefcase. Cass rang the doorbell and waited. She heard movement inside. Leo answered with a friendly expression. It faded slightly seeing their badges. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was cautious. "We're looking for Annette Croft," Cass said politely. Her tone was neutral and official. "We have follow-up questions." This was a gentle opening. "Annette," Leo called over his shoulder. His confusion was evident. "There are agents here." He stepped back to let them enter. Annette appeared from the living room. She held a watering can. She showed no surprise at their presence. Her calm was unshaken. "Agent Vance," Annette said with a nod. "You are diligent." She placed the can on a table. She gestured to the living room. The room was tidy and minimal. Cass and Miller took the sofa. Annette sat in a chair opposite. Leo remained standing nearby. "This is more than an audit," Cass began. She placed a copy of the warrant. She slid it toward Annette. "We have legal authority." Annette picked up the document. She took her time reading it. Her face showed focused attention. Leo looked over her shoulder. "This is about your finances?" Leo asked. His voice held rising concern. He looked from warrant to Annette. She gave a reassuring glance. "It appears a misunderstanding," Annette said softly. She placed the warrant back down. She folded her hands neatly. She was composed. "The Preservation Fund," Cass stated. She watched Annette's eyes. "You are the sole signatory. Can you explain its purpose?" Leo looked at Annette, confused. "What fund?" he asked. His tone was lost. This was new information. "A private charitable endeavor," Annette explained. Her answer was to Leo first. Then she looked at Cass. "Separate from museum finances." "It receives $500 biweekly," Cass continued. She opened her notebook. "From cashier's checks. Alina Rosario purchases those." Annette absorbed this without flinching. She gave a small nod. "Alina assists with errands," she confirmed. "She is reimbursed." "What is the cash source?" Cass asked. Her questions were sequential. She built a financial timeline. "That is private," Annette replied. Her voice remained even. "A benefactor wishes anonymity. I promised confidentiality." This was a prepared response. Cass had expected a version. "The benefactor provides physical cash," Cass stated. "You convert it, why?" "To track donations properly," Annette said. Her logic was superficially sound. "It creates a clean paper trail for accountability." "Where do you store cash?" Agent Miller asked. It was her first question. Her voice was lower. She observed the room. "I do not store significant cash," Annette answered. She met Miller's gaze. "Funds are provided as needed. Amounts are always the same. Cass shifted the questioning. The fund money is not spent, it only accumulates. What is the ultimate goal? Land acquisition, Annette said simply. This was a new revelation. For a preservation site, we near the target amount. Leo listened with astonishment. He knew nothing of this. He leaned against the doorframe. He processed silently. What specific land? Cass pressed. She was intrigued. It moved from abstract to tangible. Motive edged into view. A parcel near the old canal, Annette said. Her description was vague. It has unrecognized significance. The fund aims to protect it. Cass made a note. It was a verifiable claim. She could check property records. Can you provide documentation? Not at this time, Annette replied. Her posture remained relaxed. Negotiations are sensitive. Premature disclosure could jeopardize. This was a stalling technique. Cass recognized it immediately, yet the claim had weight. It was not a generic excuse. We will verify your statements, Cass said. She closed her notebook. This includes examining personal spaces. The warrant permits this. Annette stood up smoothly. I understand, she said. Please proceed, we have nothing to hide. She looked at Leo. He nodded slowly. Cass and Miller began a systematic search. They were respectful but thorough. They examined the home office first. They found household bills. They looked in the bedroom. They found modest jewelry. They found the locked drawer. Cass asked Annette to open it. Annette produced a small key. She unlocked the drawer without comment. Inside was the tablet. Cass examined it but did not power on. This is for museum research, Annette offered. A dedicated library database. Her explanation was technical. Cass placed it back. They moved to kitchen and living areas. Nothing seemed out of ordinary. The house was oppressively normal. The search yielded no secrets. Miller looked out the back window. She saw the wooden shed. What is in the outbuilding? She asked Leo. My gardening supplies and tools, Leo answered quickly. And Annette's orchid hobby. He said it with natural pride. She has a talent. We'll need to see it, Cass said. Annette retrieved the key. She led them into the backyard. The morning sun was warm. Annette unlocked the shed's main door. It revealed soil bags and tools. Everything was organized with care. Leo's new bags were stacked. The greenhouse is here, Annette said. She unlocked the interior door. She held it open. Humid, fragrant air washed over them. Cass stepped inside the controlled climate. The sight of orchids was breathtaking. They were stunningly beautiful and varied. Their colors were vibrant. Miller whistled softly in appreciation. You grow these yourself, she asked Annette. Her demeanor softened momentarily. The beauty was disarming. A long-term passion, Annette confirmed. She walked to a bench. She checked a gauge. Her familiarity was absolute. Cass observed shelves and surfaces. She saw the hollow gardening manual. It sat among reference books. She did not touch it. Her eyes scanned for records. She saw only plant care notes. They were about humidity schedules. They were in the same neat hand. This is impressive, Cass admitted. She meant it sincerely. The greenhouse represented dedication. It revealed no cash source. They concluded the search. They returned to the living room. Cass handed Annette her card. We may have more questions, she said. I am happy to clarify, Annette replied. She took the card. She placed it on the mantel. Her courtesy was unbroken. Leo showed the agents to the door. When the car left, he turned to Annette. What is really happening? He asked. His voice was strained. A complex situation, she said. She reached for his hand. I made private commitments. I could not involve you. What risk? He asked, searching her eyes. He saw only calm depth. We tell each other everything. This was the one exception, she whispered. She squeezed his hand. To protect city history and protect you from complications. He absorbed this, trust warring with hurt. You should have told me, he said finally. He did not pull away. Your ignorance was protection, she explained. Her logic was cold but sound. Now I may need your help. They will check city archives. This redirected his concern. What should I do? He asked. He was a problem solver. He wanted a concrete task. Continue as normal, she instructed. Go to the botanical garden, take pictures and notes, be visible and engaged. She gave him a role. He agreed, though still troubled. They went on their trip that afternoon. Annette was present and observant. She pointed out plants with interest. Cass went directly to her office. She pulled up property records. She searched near the old canal. The area was now industrial. She cross-referenced historical map overlays. One small triangle caught her eye. It was a utility easement. The status was city-held caretaker. The listed caretaker was A. Croft. This was confirmation. Annette told a verifiable truth. She was the official steward. Cass printed the property record. She needed to understand the history. She drove to the city planning archives. It was in a basement. The archives were musty and poorly lit. A clerk helped find Canal Green files. It referred to a failed 1973 project. The file was thick. Buried inside was the original deed. It transferred the parcel to the city. The condition was community green space. That condition was unfulfilled. Attached were stewardship renewal forms. They were signed by Annette for 8 years. Her signature was the same cursive. The role involved no pay. So Annette was legally connected. But how did this connect to money? Cass sat thinking. The fund was to buy city land. That made no sense, unless the city planned to sell, or funds were for something else. Cass needed to see the parcel. She drove to the canal area. The parcel was overgrown with weeds. It was behind a chain-link fence. A sign read, "No dumping." Cass walked the perimeter. The ground felt uneven. She noticed dark soil patches. They contrasted with lighter soil. She took photographs with her phone. She then returned to her car. Her next stop was Sunset Ridge. The file mentioned Henry Walsh. He was a junior planner. Cass hoped he was lucid. The home was quiet and well kept. The receptionist directed her to a sunroom. Henry Walsh was thin and in his 80s. He sat by a window with a book. He looked up as Cass introduced herself. His eyes were sharp. "Canal Green," he repeated slowly. A sad smile touched his lips. "A dream that never woke up. The city got the land." "What was special?" Cass asked. She sat opposite him. She kept her voice conversational. "A buffer zone," Henry explained. "Between a chemical plant and canal, the soil was contaminated. Cleaning was too expensive." This was critical information. The land was environmentally damaged. So the project was abandoned, Cass clarified. "Officially put on hold," Henry said. He shrugged. "I filed stewardship paperwork for years to keep it from industrial use." "Who handles that now?" Cass asked, knowing. "A nice woman from the museum," Henry said. His face brightened. "Annette. She took over 8 years back. She asked detailed questions." "Did she know about contamination?" Cass pressed gently. "Oh, I told her everything," Henry confirmed. He nodded. "I gave her environmental reports. She asked many questions." Cass thanked Henry for his time. She left with her mind racing. The narrative transformed completely. This was not hidden money. Annette knew the land was poisoned. She was amassing a fund quietly. The purpose was likely remediation. She tried to clean secretly. But why secrecy? Cass pondered on her drive. Public knowledge could cause panic. It could make the city sell cheaply. A quiet cleanup would avoid that. It would protect future green space. The scale was immense, though. It cost more than $60,000. Cass needed the horticultural angle. She remembered the orchids. She remembered Leo's mention. She decided to research rare orchids. Annette and Leo returned at dusk. They had dinner with little conversation. Unspoken tension hung between them. It was uncomfortable. After dinner, Annette went to the greenhouse. She did not update her ledger. She examined the Dendrobium spectabile closely. Its blooming cycle was ending. She prepared a sterile cutting tool. She took a single bulb division. She placed it in growth medium. This was the next asset. She then checked the tablet. There was no new email. The buyer was patient. She powered down and locked it away. Cass researched orchid trade that evening. She was astonished by the prices. Rare hybrids sold for thousands. The hypothesis had foundation. The cash source was orchid sales. Annette grew valuable plants. She sold them discreetly. She laundered proceeds through Alina. The money saved in the fund. It was for soil remediation, a secret environmental project. The dedication was staggering. She needed proof of sales. She needed to identify a buyer. That was her next hurdle. She drafted a warrant for records. She also needed to speak with Alina. Alina's role was central. Cass would interview her Monday. She would do it discreetly. Sunday passed quietly for the Crofts. Leo worked on his designs. Annette tended plants and read. They shared thoughtful silence. Annette knew the investigation advanced. The agents saw the greenhouse. They would make the connection. She knew this day might come. Her contingency plans were in motion. She prepared a document packet. It explained soil tests and quotes. It outlined the honest purpose. She would release them at the right time. Timing needed to force an outcome. Authorities must see the whole picture. This shaped their decision. Monday morning, Annette went to work early. She wanted to be settled. She cataloged donated postcards. The work was soothing. Cass arrived at the museum at 10. She asked to speak with Alina privately. Margaret Beaufort was still away. This made it easier. Alina met Cass in a meeting room. She looked nervous but eager. "Is this about the audit?" she asked. She folded her hands. "In a way," Cass said. She placed a check image. "Do you recognize this?" She pointed to E. Rosario. Alina's face went pale. She stared at the image. "I bought that check," she admitted quietly, "but for museum business." "How many times?" Cass asked. Her voice was factual. She needed to establish the pattern. "Maybe 20 times," Alina estimated. She was visibly shaken. "Over a few years, Annette gave me cash. I got a check." "Why did you do this?" Cass inquired. She built a record of state of mind. "She said a restoration project," Alina explained. Her words came in a rush. "A donor wanted anonymity. It seemed normal." "Did you ask for details?" Cass pressed gently. "Sometimes," Alina said, nodding. "Annette said it was sensitive. Details could jeopardize funding. I trusted her." Cass believed her. Alina was an unwitting participant. Her curiosity was channeled into maps. This kept her from asking. It was clever management. "You're not in trouble," Cass assured. "Do not discuss this with Annette. That is very important." She gave a stern look. Alina agreed, eyes wide. Cass left with a clearer picture. The financial mechanism was mapped. The next step was confrontation. But Cass wanted more evidence first. She needed the soil tested. She needed proof of contamination. She needed cleanup quotes. She drove to the environmental agency. She submitted a request for soil tests. The clerk said a few days. Cass left feeling solid. Annette knew Alina was interviewed. She saw the pale, distracted face. Alina avoided her eyes. The message was clear. It was time for the next phase. Annette drafted an email. She sent it to the Parks Department. She requested a meeting. She cited her steward role. She proposed a time later that week. This created an official trail. It showed good faith. She then packed her bag to leave early. She told the guard she had a headache. She walked home a longer route. She needed to think. Leo was not home when she arrived. She went straight to the greenhouse. She retrieved the hidden ledger. She photographed every page. She compiled soil test reports. She added 3 remediation bids. They were from reputable firms. Costs aligned with the target. She assembled this into a folder. She would send it at the precise moment. That moment was not today. She needed the city engaged first. Her goal was not escape. It was ensuring the land's future. The money would be used properly. That was the only outcome. Cass wrote her case summary that afternoon. She outlined Orchid to fund to land. She noted no personal enrichment. She highlighted the altruistic motive. Her supervisor reviewed it with interest. "A green vigilante?" he asked, leaning back. He seemed amused and impressed. "In a way," Cass agreed. "But she broke regulations. The structured deposits are serious. Intent may not excuse method. Agreed, her supervisor said. But it changes proceeding, not a criminal predator, a misguided philanthropist. He authorized full evidence pursuit. They would test the parcel soil. They would identify an orchid buyer. The case entered final stage. Cass left feeling a strange emptiness. The chase was often more satisfying. Understanding defanged the investigation. It became administrative. That evening, Annette told Leo everything. She showed soil reports and bids. She explained the fund and orchid sales. She laid out the mosaic. He listened in stunned silence for an hour. When she finished, he took her hands. "You did this alone?" he asked. His voice was thick. "I had to," she whispered. Tears did not come, but her composure showed a crack. It was a faint hand tremor. "We'll face it together now," he said firmly. He pulled her into an embrace. He was her anchor. She leaned into him. The next morning brought a formal envelope. It was delivered to the bungalow by courier. It was a city parks department summons. It confirmed the meeting. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon. It included the park's director and attorney. The subject was the parcel's future disposition. This was her forum. Annette prepared her documentation packet meticulously. She included the historical deed and forms. She added old environmental test reports. She included recent private tests. Recent tests showed reduced contamination. Her small efforts made a difference. They were not enough for full cleanup. The bids outlined the solution. She printed the fund's bank statements. They showed steady capital accumulation. The final balance was $68,500. It neared the lowest bid. Leo helped organize materials in a binder. He created clear divider tabs. His design skills made information accessible. They worked in a new partnership. "What will you say?" Leo asked finally. He closed the binder and looked at her. His concern was now strategic. "I will present the problem and solution," she said. Her voice was calm with purpose. "I will show the fund is ready. I will ask for cooperation." "And the legal issues," Leo pressed. He knew agents were still investigating. The meeting could trigger their move. Timing was the delicate variable. "They will resolve around the outcome," Annette explained. She placed the binder in her satchel. "A positive result changes the narrative. It provides a path forward." She left for the museum, satchel in hand. Her day would be normal routines. She needed to project stability. Any panic could undermine her. Cass Vance was also preparing. The Environmental Agency fast-tracked her request. They had historic soil data. They agreed to take new samples today. Cass met a technician at the parcel fence. His name was Mark. He carried a soil probe and sample bags. They signed in and entered. The ground was uneven and overgrown. Mark chose 3 locations for sampling. He drove the probe into dark patches. He extracted long earth cores. The soil had a faint chemical odor. Mark placed cores into sealed vials. He labeled them with coordinates. "Preliminary results in 48 hours, he said. "What are you testing for?" Cass asked. She watched him pack the cooled case. "Heavy metals primarily," Mark said. "Lead, arsenic, chromium, legacy contaminants from industry. Historic reports show high levels." Cass took her own photographs. She documented the context for her file. This proved Annette's known motivation. It also showed the environmental threat. As they packed, Cass's phone rang. It was her office. The warrant for online records was approved. It covered email and search history. Cass needed to execute it immediately. She drove directly to the Croft home. Leo answered again, his expression grim. He expected this step. "We have a warrant for digital devices," Cass explained. She handed him the document. "This includes the tablet. We also need personal computers." Leo nodded silently and let her in. Annette was not home, simplifying things. He retrieved the tablet from the drawer. He brought her laptop from the study. Cass bagged and tagged both as evidence. She provided Leo with a detailed receipt. "This is standard procedure," she assured. Her tone was professional. "Will this help her?" Leo asked suddenly. He stood in his living room. He looked for solid ground. She was trying to do good. The law doesn't always recognize intent, Cass said carefully. But understanding is important. It influences resolution. This was her honest answer. She left with the devices in a secure case. Her next stop was the forensics lab. Technicians could clone the drives quickly. They would search for orchid sales. Annette returned from the museum at her usual time. Leo told her about the seizure. She listened without visible reaction. She anticipated this. "They will find the correspondence," she said calmly. She hung her satchel on its hook. "They will see buyer inquiries. That completes the financial picture." "Are you afraid?" Leo asked. He needed to understand her state. He could not read her face. "Fear is not a useful variable," Annette stated. She moved to start dinner. "The process is in motion. We must focus on the meeting." She was a general preparing for battle. Her strategy was set, evidence assembled. The only factor was execution. She trusted her plan's logic. That evening, the forensics technician made a discovery. He found the hidden email account on the tablet. He recovered several deleted messages. They were with KM. Messages discussed plant specimens and divisions. They used botanical Latin names. They referenced delivery timelines and payment. Payments were always mailed cash. The technician compiled a report for Cass. It included email headers and text. It proved high-value plant sales. It provided the missing cash source. Cass read the report late that night. The mechanism was now fully proven. Orchid sales generated cash. Cash became cashier's checks. Checks built the fund. The fund's purpose was land remediation. That was supported by soil tests. Annette orchestrated a perfect private circle. It was secret philanthropy. Cass now decided the next legal step. She could recommend criminal charges for structuring. She could seek civil forfeiture of the fund. Both were standard tools. Yet applying them felt deeply wrong. It would punish cleaning toxic soil. It would seize money for public good. The law was a blunt instrument. She needed to discuss with her supervisor. She also needed to contact the Parks Department. Their meeting changed the landscape. Cass decided to attend as an observer. She called the park's director the next morning. She identified herself as a federal investigator. She explained her interest in the parcel. She asked to attend discreetly. The director, surprised, agreed to her request. He would list her as a consultant. This avoided alarm or speculation. Cass now had her window. Thursday passed with tense quiet. Annette worked finishing loose ends. She delegated tasks to Alina clearly. She prepared for a potential absence. Alina followed instructions without question. She was anxious around Annette now. Trust between them was fractured. Annette accepted this casualty. Leo tried to work at his office. He found focusing on designs impossible. His mind was filled with reports. He left early for a long walk. Cass received preliminary soil test results. New samples confirmed ongoing contamination. Levels were lower than the 1975 report. This suggested some natural attenuation. The report concluded the land was unsafe. It required professional remediation. The cost range matched Annette's bids. Evidence was irrefutably aligned. Friday arrived, cloudy and still. Annette dressed in a simple navy dress. She carried the satchel with the binder. Leo drove her to the municipal building. They entered the conference room together. The director and attorney were already seated. A third woman sat slightly apart. It was Cass Vance, neutral. Annette acknowledged Cass with a slight nod. She anticipated her presence. It streamlined the process. All decision-makers were present. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Croft," the director began. He was pragmatic Douglas Reed. "You requested this meeting. You have a proposal." "I do," Annette said. She opened her satchel and removed the binder. She placed summary copies before each person. Her movements were deliberate. "For 8 years I have been steward," she started. Her voice was clear and calm. "Review revealed significant soil contamination. The city abandoned plans due to cost." The director and attorney exchanged a glance. They knew the old reports. They chose to ignore the problem. It was a dormant liability. Annette continued. Private testing confirmed persistent contamination. It poses a long-term environmental risk. It prevents beneficial public use. She slid test reports across. Cass watched the officials' faces. They reacted with defensive discomfort. Annette exposed a neglected civic failure. This was bold and risky. I initiated a private effort, Annette stated. She opened to the fund statements. I cultivated and sold rare orchids. All proceeds went into an account. She showed monthly deposit records. She showed the consistent increments. She did not shy from the method. She presented it as fact. The preservation fund holds $68,000. Its sole purpose is remediation. She presented 3 sealed bids. These are competitive quotes for cleanup. The room was utterly silent. The attorney picked up a bid and Reed. Douglas Reed stared at the statement. The numbers told an astonishing story. You did this alone? Reed asked, his voice hushed. He looked from papers to Annette's face. He tried to reconcile the woman with the act. I had administrative assistance, Annette conceded. She glanced briefly at Cass. Conception and execution were mine. The goal was always public use. Cass finally spoke. The mechanism violated structuring laws, she said. Her tone was factual. Evidence supports her stated purpose. There is no personal enrichment. This was crucial from the investigator. It framed violations within context. Officials understood the federal interest. Stakes were suddenly higher. What are you proposing? The city attorney asked. He was cautious, eyeing liability. The city cannot accept private funds without process. There are rules. I propose a partnership, Annette said. She prepared for this objection. The fund transfers to a new land trust. The trust contracts cleanup overseen by city. She looked at Leo, who nodded. My husband is a landscape architect. He prepared a pro bono design. It integrates into the Riverwalk Greenway. Leo opened his portfolio. Drawings showed a beautiful small garden. It had native plants and paths. It turned poison into community asset. The vision was compelling. Douglas Reed was visibly moved. The park was his department's failed dream. Here it was offered back, funded. Bureaucratic hurdles remained. Legal issues remain, the attorney insisted. He looked at Cass for guidance. If the government pursues charges or seizes the fund. Cass took a deep breath. This was her decision moment. The U.S. attorney will review, she said carefully. My recommendation is non-prosecution. The fund must be used for its purpose. This was a significant departure. It was the only just outcome. She advocated justice over strict legalism. Officials understood the weight. We would need to form the trust, Reed said, thinking aloud. We'd need environmental review. It could take months for approvals. He moved from if asterisk to how. The fund covers legal costs, Annette said. She budgeted for this. The structure can be whatever required. My condition is a public park. The meeting continued another hour. They discussed trustees and oversight committees. Leo contributed park design expertise. Cass outlined federal disposition steps. Annette spoke little during this discussion. She achieved her primary objective. Mechanism was in institutional hands. They would carry it forward. As the meeting adjourned, Reed shook her hand. His grip was firm, expression respectful. An extraordinary gift, Ms. Croft, he said. Unorthodox, but a gift. The attorney gathered his copy of bids. He promised a memorandum of understanding. Cass stayed as others filed out. She wanted a final word. Leo gave Annette's shoulder a squeeze and left. The room held only the 2 women. The large table was scattered with papers. You planned for this, Cass said. It was not a question. She leaned against the table. You used the investigation to force the city's hand. A tool is defined by use, Annette replied softly. She placed documents in the binder. The law brought accountability. My actions fixed a problem. You broke the law, Cass stated. Her heart wasn't in the rebuke. I did, Annette acknowledged without shame. I weighed violation against outcome. The land will be clean. The community gains a space. The balance is acceptable. Cass had encountered many criminals. They were driven by greed or anger. Annette was driven by precise calculus of good. She was unique. My report recommends non-prosecution, Cass confirmed. It requires dissolving the fund. Money moves to the land trust. You will have no further control. That is the desired outcome, Annette said. She closed the binder. Control was a means to an end. The end is now secured. There may be a civil penalty, Cass warned. A fine for structuring violations, a fraction of the total, a formal legal consequence. Annette nodded. She anticipated this as well. I set aside funds for that. It is a project cost. I am prepared to pay. Cass felt conversation was complete. She had no more questions. The mystery was solved. She collected her notepad. Good luck with your garden, Cass said as she turned to leave. Thank you, Agent Vance, Annette replied. For your thoroughness, it was necessary for resolution. Her gratitude was genuine. Cass walked out of the building. The cloudy sky was clearing. She felt professional closure. The case was effectively over. Annette and Leo drove home in silence. The weeks of tension finally broke. It was replaced by deep fatigue. They ordered takeout and ate on the sofa. Is it finished? Leo asked later, readying for bed. The day's victory felt unreal. Legal process will continue, Annette said. She brushed her hair at the table. But decisive action is complete. The land will be healed. She looked at her reflection. The face was the same. Calm, controlled, purposeful, yet she felt an internal shift. A years-long wait was gone. The next week brought formal letters. The U.S. attorney offered non-prosecution agreement. It outlined Cass's described terms. Annette and Leo reviewed it with an attorney. They signed and returned the documents. The preservation fund was officially closed. Its balance went to the Riverwalk Land Trust. Annette was a non-voting advisor. The city's environmental review began. The remediation firm started planning. Leo's park designs were approved. He would oversee landscaping pro bono. Margaret Beaufort returned from conference. She was furious about scandal touching her museum. She demanded Annette's resignation in a meeting. Annette had her letter ready. She cleaned out her desk at the museum. She left keys and access card on the director's desk. She did not say goodbye to Alina. A clean break was best. Annette now spent days at home. She tended her greenhouse without sales pressure. She grew orchids for beauty's sake. The hidden ledger was shredded. Cass Vance closed her case file with a report. She summarized facts and unusual resolution. She filed it marked, resolved, non-prosecution. She thought of Annette with respect. One afternoon, a letter arrived for Annette. It was from the State Horticultural Society. They heard of her collection unofficially. They invited her to speak. It was an invitation into legitimacy. It acknowledged expertise without judgment. She accepted and drafted her talk. It was a new, open chapter. Months passed. Cleanup of the parcel began. Fencing went up, equipment moved in. Contaminated soil was removed and replaced. Leo visited often, taking photographs. He showed Annette progress each week. She watched transformation from a distance. She felt no need to visit. Her connection was now conceptual. The Riverwalk Land Trust grew beyond that parcel. It attracted other donors and interest. It worked on other neglected spaces. Her act sparked a wider movement. She remained an advisor, attending meetings. She spoke little, but suggestions were precise. Other trustees valued her quiet input. She found a low-profile role. One spring day, Leo came home with a sapling. It was a young river birch. For the backyard, he said. To celebrate, they planted it together. As they patted soil around roots, Leo took her hand. Are you happy? He asked. The question was simple but profound. Annette looked at the newly planted tree. She considered the word happy. It implied a fleeting emotional state. What she felt was more solid. I am satisfied, she said finally. She squeezed his hand. The pattern is complete. The result is correct. That was her version of happiness. It was a complex equation solved. It was a mosaic finally finished. Every piece was in its place. The river birch sapling established itself quickly. Its leaves trembled in the slightest breeze. Annette observed its growth with quiet interest. It was a new variable. She adjusted her watering schedule for it. She noted its sunlight needs in a journal. This journal held only horticultural observations. It was a record of life. Leo's park project entered the construction phase. He was often at the canal site until dusk. He came home with soil on his boots. His work had new meaning. One evening, he brought home a small flat stone. It was discarded bluestone from the site. "A souvenir," he said, placing it on the patio, "from the old contaminated layer." Annette ran fingers over the cool surface. It was just a rock, harmless now. It represented physical proof of change. She placed it by the new tree. The non-prosecution agreement was fully executed. The civil penalty was paid from savings. It was a modest fine, as predicted. Annette wrote the check without sentiment. Their financial life was simpler and leaner. Leo's pro bono work meant less income. They adjusted their budget with calm practicality. The loss felt like ethical balance. Annette received her official symposium invitation. It was on threatened epiphytic orchids. Her talk was scheduled for 20 minutes. She assembled her slides and notes. She would not mention financial aspects. She would focus on propagation techniques. She would discuss humidity and sterile media. It was a return to pure science. At the museum, Elena Rosario was promoted. She became acting head of collections. Margaret Beaufort reluctantly approved the move. The museum needed stability. Elena sent Annette a brief, formal email. It thanked her for past mentorship. It wished her well in future endeavors. The tone was professionally distant. Annette replied with a simple thank you. She felt no bitterness about the severance. Elena's path was now her own. The map project earned her recognition. Cass Vance was assigned a new case. It involved a traditional pyramid scheme. Motives were greed and desperation. She missed the puzzle of the Orchid Fund. She drove past the canal parcel one afternoon. The fence now held a new sign. Future home of Riverwalk Canal Garden. The contaminated soil was gone. Cass parked and watched the workers. Leo Croft consulted with a foreman. He pointed at grading plans on a clipboard. He was in his element. Cass did not approach him. Her role in this story was over. She had been the catalyst. That was the law's function at its best. She started her car and drove to the office. The memory of Annette's calm face stayed. Human motives were vast and complex. Not every file fit a category. Annette's symposium talk was in a university auditorium. The audience was academics and amateurs. She wore a simple suit and spoke from a podium. Her voice was calm. She showed images of her greenhouse setups. She detailed methods for preventing root rot. She explained precise fertilizer dilution ratios. The audience listened appreciatively. During questions, someone asked about sourcing. "How do you acquire rare varieties?" An older man inquired. His tone was purely curious. "Through sanctioned plant exchanges," Annette answered. It was a true statement about early acquisitions. Ethical propagation is preservation's foundation. The answer satisfied. After her talk, several people approached. They asked for advice on struggling plants. She gave concise, practical suggestions. She enjoyed this pure knowledge exchange. A woman from the society board introduced herself. She was Dr. Irene Finch. She was Professor Finch's wife. "Arthur spoke highly of your clarity," she said warmly. "He was a great help," Annette replied. She felt genuine fondness for the professor. His questions refined her justifications. "We would be honored if you'd join us," Dr. Finch continued. "We have a sustainable cultivation committee. Your expertise would be invaluable." She handed Annette a brochure. It was an invitation into a legitimate community. It was based on skill, not secrecy. Annette accepted the brochure. She promised to consider it. She returned home that evening feeling quietly energized. Leo made dinner to celebrate her talk. He asked about the event, listening. He celebrated this public version. Dr. Finch invited me to a committee, Annette mentioned over dessert. She stirred her tea slowly. Monthly meetings and research review. Will you do it? Leo asked. He hoped she would say yes. He wanted her to have a connection, a clean, open connection. I believe I will, she said after consideration. My knowledge can be of service. That is a good use. Service was a concept she understood. The next week, she attended her first meeting. It was in a botanical garden library. Members were botanists and master gardeners. They discussed water conservation. Annette listened for most of the meeting. When she spoke, it was about mycorrhizal fungus. It could reduce fertilizer dependency for orchids. The chairperson wrote it down eagerly. She left with an assigned reading list. She felt pleasant intellectual engagement. It was a new kind of problem solving. It was collaborative and above board. Months turned and seasons changed. The canal garden took shape under Leo's guidance. Paths were laid, irrigation buried. Native shrubs were planted in drifts. The community was invited to a planting day. Volunteers arrived to place plug plants. Annette and Leo worked side by side. They placed switchgrass into the earth. A local reporter covered the event. She interviewed Leo about design philosophy. She then turned to Annette. You're the steward who started this, she asked. I was one who recognized a need, Annette corrected gently. The community is finishing the work. She deflected credit to volunteers. The reporter moved on. Annette preferred being a face in the crowd. She was not the story, the garden was. That was the correct alignment. She wiped her hands and continued. The park's official opening was in early summer. The land trust planned a dedication ceremony. They invited Cass Vance as a guest of honor. Cass debated attending. She decided her presence would be a shadow. The day should belong to the community. She sent a polite note declining. She included a trust donation. Annette received the donation acknowledgement. She saw Cass's name on the contributor list. It was a final, graceful loop closure. She placed it in a file. Opening day arrived with perfect blue skis. A ribbon stretched across the garden entrance. The mayor gave a speech about civic renewal. He did not mention contamination. Leo stood beside the mayor, beaming with pride. Annette stood slightly back in the crowd. She wore a simple dress and sun hat. She observed with detached interest. When the ribbon was cut, people flowed in. Children ran down winding paths. Elderly couples found benches in shade. The space filled with life immediately. Annette walked the perimeter path slowly. She touched leaves of a newly planted oak. She listened to the water features babble. It mimicked the nearby canal. She found a bench under a willow tree. She sat and watched the community enjoy the space. This was the outcome. This was the final sum. Leo found her there after crowds thinned. He sat beside her, his hand finding hers. They sat in comfortable silence. Water and distant laughter filled air. It's good, Leo said simply. It was the ultimate summation. It is, Annette agreed. She leaned her head against his shoulder. It was a rare public affection. It felt appropriate for the moment. Their life settled into a new steady rhythm. Annette served on her horticultural committee. She gave occasional talks to garden clubs. She became a respected figure. Leo's firm received more public space commissions. His canal garden was a portfolio highlight. He balanced city and private projects. He consulted Annette on plants. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the museum. It was from new director David Chen. Margaret Beaufort had retired. He wrote of a new initiative. They were creating a green history archive. It would document environmental transformation. He asked if she would donate her papers. Her papers included soil reports. They would include remediation bids and trust documents. They would tell the true behind-the-scenes story. He promised sensitive and respectful curation. She discussed it with Leo. They want to make it a lesson, she said, looking at the letter. A citizen-led environmental action case study. Is that something you want? Leo asked. He knew her privacy preference was deep. This placed methods under permanent scrutiny. Facts are already public record, she reasoned. The non-prosecution agreement is a legal document. Curating the narrative might be beneficial. She saw educational logic. She agreed to donate a curated selection. She worked with David Chen on captions. The display would not sensationalize irregularities. It would frame them as means. The Green History exhibit opened the following fall. A small panel covered the canal garden story. It displayed 1975 and 2024 soil tests. It showed Leo's renderings. Annette's role was catalyst and steward. It did not use vigilante or investigation. It was dignified acknowledgement. She visited the exhibit once alone. She stood before the display for 10 minutes. She read every label and examined documents. Seeing private calculations publicly was surreal. It felt like an X-ray. It was clinical, factual, and complete. She approved of the presentation. It was without melodrama or moralizing. It was history, plain and simple. She left the museum and walked home. Autumn air was crisp with leaf scent. Her life existed in 2 archives now. Both were testaments to action. Winter came, and the garden entered dormancy. Perennial beds died back, trees shed leaves. Leo explained this necessary rest period. Plants gathered strength for spring. Annette's greenhouse remained a tropical oasis. She focused on breeding for disease resistance. She published an article in the Society newsletter. It was well received. She and Leo developed a new weekend ritual. They walked to the canal garden in all weather. They observed seasonal and light changes. They saw year-round use. On one walk, they passed a young mother. She pushed a stroller along the smooth path. She smiled at them, a stranger's polite smile. They smiled back. That anonymous exchange felt profoundly meaningful. She was just another visitor. She altered a piece of the world. She left no personal mark. The systemic processes she set continued. The land trust acquired another blighted lot. They began planning a second micropark. The model replicated independently. Professor Finch invited them for tea one afternoon. His sitting room was cluttered with books. He served Earl Grey in delicate cups. He asked about legacy. "Is the garden your intended legacy?" he inquired. His eyes were kind and curious. "A physical mark upon the world." "A legacy implies an ending," Annette responded. She sipped her tea, considering. "The garden is a process. It will change long after I am gone." The professor nodded, pleased. "So you are part of a continuum, not an author but a scribe making a necessary edit." "Precisely," Annette said. His metaphor was apt. An edit corrects an error. The text continues beyond the correction. That spring, the river birch unfurled new leaves. It was taller and sturdier than before. Annette noted its progress in her journal. It was thriving. She stood back and looked at their property. The bungalow, shed, greenhouse, tree. It was a complete and peaceful system. It required only maintenance now. She went inside and sat at the kitchen table. Leo was sketching at the other end. He worked on a school courtyard design. He hummed as his pencil moved. Annette opened a book on mycology. She researched fungal partnerships with plant roots. It was a new area for committee work. Words and diagrams absorbed her. Afternoon sun slanted through the window. It warmed the wooden table and her book pages. The house was quiet except for pencil scratches. It was a perfect moment. She achieved what she set out to achieve. The land was healed. The money was spent for its purpose. Her private obsession became public utility. The investigation was a closed file. The museum held the factual record. The garden grew without her intervention. Her life was her own again, simplified. She looked up from her book and watched Leo. His focus was complete, contentment evident. They navigated the storm together and reached calm. Their partnership was constant. Annette Croft returned to her reading. The story of orchids and fund was finished. It was archived, literally and metaphorically. A new story, quieter, had begun. It was a story of small contributions. It was a story of observed growth. It was a story without secrets. It was told in plain light. She found it to be a good story.